Thank you for watching the Housing Element 2022 update informational videos. The Housing Element is the city's long-term housing plan prepared by the Planning Department in coordination with multiple city agencies. This video is made by the SF Planning Community Equity Team and is the second of a three-part series. Part 1 provides context on San Francisco's housing inequities and an approach to dismantling such inequities. Part 2 provides an overview of the community outreach process and findings. Part 3 identifies key policy shifts that require community consideration. We start our presentations with a land acknowledgement. The San Francisco Planning Department acknowledges that we are on the unceded ancestral homeland of the Ramaytush Ohlone, who are the original inhabitants of the San Francisco Peninsula. As the indigenous stewards of this land, and in accordance with their traditions, the Ramaytush Ohlone have never ceded, lost, nor forgotten their responsibilities as the caretakers of this place, as well as for all peoples who reside in their traditional territory. As guests, we recognize that we benefit from living and working on their traditional homeland, and we wish to pay our respects by acknowledging the ancestors, elders, and relatives of the Ramaytush Ohlone community, and by affirming their sovereign rights as First Peoples. In this video, we will discuss the outreach and engagement principles guiding the Housing Element 2022 update. We will provide a summary of the Phase 1 outreach and engagement process and an introduction to the second phase of community engagement, which was recently launched. The outreach and engagement efforts informing the Housing Element update are guided by the principles of inclusive representation, meaningful contribution, access to information and participation tools, and transparent communication. These principles provide critical guidance to the outreach and engagement strategies that continue to adapt to the challenges of the COVID-19 crisis. Since the last Housing Element update in 2014, the Planning Department has collaborated with communities in the development of several housing-related initiatives, including the Housing Affordability Strategies, the Community Stabilization Report, the San Francisco Housing Needs and Trends Report, the Cultural Heritage Survey, the Mission Action Plan 2020, Central Soma Plan, Connect SF, Excelsior and Outer Mission Neighborhood Strategy, and the District 1 Community Needs Assessment. Community input related to housing collected as part of these initiatives was revisited to provide a community-focused starting point for the housing element. The next Housing Element update will be guided by the community values emerging from these recently completed initiatives, which include a focus on racial and social equity, elimination of community displacement, affordable housing choices for everyone in all neighborhoods, and thriving neighborhoods resilient to climate and health crisis. Phase 1 of outreach and engagement started in June 2020 and was completed in December. This was a comprehensive process where diverse community voices were convened to vet the key ideas emerging from recently completed initiatives. Centering the housing element in racial and social equity requires engagement of communities historically absent in housing conversations. This includes communities of color, low-income communities, and other vulnerable populations. Phase 1 of outreach and engagement addressed this by 1, meeting communities where they are. This meant attending events hosted by elected officials, community leaders, or community-based organizations. And 2, combining virtual engagement with traditional tools. While most engagement was virtual due to health needs, an in-person community survey was administered at food distribution centers and through resident ambassadors and service providers to address digital disparities among priority communities. The first phase of outreach included 15 listening sessions and a community survey with over 1,600 respondents administered in person with the help of our resident ambassadors and service providers. We also held collaborative meetings with a group of housing policy advocacy and development experts and a coordinated interagency review process, including core agencies, which included the Department of Homelessness and Supportive Housing, the Mayor's Office of Housing and Community Development, the Office of Economic and Workforce Development, the Office of Racial Equity, plus 13 other agencies. This process resulted in the first draft goals, policies, and actions that were published in April 2020. Here are some details about the communities engaged during this first phase of outreach. Planning attended trusted community meetings in an effort to reach the residents most impacted by housing inequities across different districts. The community survey, administered in person by resident ambassadors and service providers, successfully reached a higher percentage of people of color, low-income residents, renters, and unhoused respondents. The Housing Policy Group consisted of 9 collaborative meetings with participants representing a total of 49 housing advocacy organizations and development experts. A summary of the input gathered during the first phase of outreach is available online. Findings from this process informed the first draft goals, policies, and actions, which were developed in collaboration with other city agencies. The community input gathered reflects a broad range of perspectives, at times in conflict. The goal of the first draft of this housing plan is to translate this input into goals, policies, and actions, specifically to advance racial and social equity while meeting state requirements. The first draft of the housing element and supporting materials were published online on April 8th. With this milestone, planning kicked off the second phase of outreach and engagement, which will extend until December 2021. The purpose of the second phase of outreach and engagement is to work with the community to refine the goals, policies, and actions included in the first draft. The central component is a community-led engagement strategy that consists of approximately 15 to 20 focus groups centered on American Indian, Black, and other communities of color, low-income communities, immigrants and non-English speakers, seniors, people with disabilities, LGBTQ+, unhoused families and individuals, and other vulnerable groups. The focus groups aim to elevate and empower the voices and priorities of vulnerable groups and provide direction to decision makers about which proposed policies and actions would have the greatest benefit to vulnerable groups in the short, medium, and long term. This input will help identify any key ideas or voices that are missing. In parallel, planning will hold community group conversations where planning will join community group events and meetings, and small conversations based on expertise with the Housing Policy Group. In addition, planning will seek guidance from community leaders through the Human Rights Community Roundtable platform and collaborate with planning's recently formed Equity Advisory Council. Through these conversations, community leaders and residents will shape the engagement process and help define the housing element goals, policies, and actions. Following a coordinated interagency review, the second draft of the housing element will be published in November 2021. A partnership framework that involves planning, consultants, and community-based organizations, otherwise known as CBOs, has been established to implement this community-led engagement pilot. This framework allows partner CBOs to collaborate as conveners, co-hosts, and co-facilitators for the focus groups. Convener CBOs are supporting this process by nominating and convening resident participants to take part in the focus groups, while co-host partners will take an active role in the design of the sessions. In addition to these tasks, co-facilitating partners will take the role of lead facilitator and help collect post-event feedback. Planning has secured funding to recognize the efforts of partner CBOs and resident participants. These conversations will help center the housing element in racial and social equity by elevating the voices of communities of color, low-income households, and vulnerable groups. Planning recognizes the leadership and commitment of the partner CBOs and resident participants who are supporting this engagement process. You can also provide input on the draft goals, policies, and actions using our online platform by visiting our website, sfhousingelement.org. To share input, click on the Share Input on Draft Plan tab. There are 2 ways to explore the draft goals, policies, and actions. You can explore them and provide input using our digital participation platform by simply scrolling down to the goals and clicking on any of the goals you wish to review. This will take you to that draft goal section where you can read more about that goal under the framework section and review each of its related policies and actions. Vote on the effectiveness of the actions related to each policy by simply clicking on the thumbs up or thumbs down icons next to each action. Or comment on that policy by clicking on the Share Input button below. If this is your first time participating, you will be asked to fill a demographic card. You can also explore the draft goals, policies, and actions using the interactive sorting tool linked at the top of the Share Input page or through the drop-down menu when you hover over the tab. This tool allows you to explore the draft policy updates by filtering by themes. Simply click on one or several of the themes on the left to see the related goals, policies, and actions. Choose if you want to see only goals, policies, or actions, or a combination of the three. To share input, click on the desired box and you will be redirected back to its location on our online participation platform. This concludes part 1 of the Housing Element 2022 Update 3-part series. Thank you for watching. We invite you to watch the next video, part 3, to learn about the key policy shifts for consideration. Dismantling the underlying inequities requires the kind of structural changes which were unthinkable in the past but seem like common sense today. It is important to remember that it is within our power to overcome our history and build a more affordable, more resilient, and more just city.